Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Fandoms Assemble, where we'll be breaking down content from all your favorite fandoms, from the Marvel Universe to Harry Potter and the wider Wizarding World, Disney, Pixar, Star Wars, Game of Thrones, and really whatever else this golden age of IP decides to throw at us next. My name's Steve O'Born Jr., and I'll be your host as we embark on this journey through the magic of modern-day media. I'd like to take a moment to thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending a portion of your day with me, and I hope that you find this pod to be both entertaining and informative, but most importantly, a satisfying resource for all those who love to think way too hard about our favorite movies, books, and television shows. If you're like me, you run to the Reddit boards, Twitter feeds after that latest episode drops, and you're already Googling Easter eggs on the ride home from the movie theater. I'm here to tell you that that's okay. There are others of us out there, and I hope that Fandoms Assemble can be the arena where all that beautiful obsession can live and grow. Let's get to it. This episode of Fandoms Assemble will be covering Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Episode 3, The Power Broker. But before we get into Episode 3, a quick recap of Episode 2. Last time we saw the Flag Smashers, they were stealing vaccines for a refugee camp, and we found out that all 8 of them are super soldiers. Then we have Sam Wilson, a.k.a. the Falcon, discovering that Isaiah Bradley was in fact the first Black Captain America back in the 50s. Not to mention a recurring theme in the last episode was John Walker, also known as the new Captain America, constantly butting heads with our pal Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes. And then by episode end, we had Sam Wilson and Bucky agreeing to go see Baron Zemo to figure out how someone could possibly have recreated the Super Soldier Serum and whether Hydra's involved. Now, let's get to the breakdown of the episode. So, in WandaVision fashion, Episode 3 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier opens with a commercial for the Global Repatriation Council. After the commercial closes, we cut to John Walker and Lamar Hoskins conducting a raid on the same safe house that we saw Carly Morgenthau and the rest of the Flag Smashers at in Episode 2. Upon interrogating the gentleman who owns the property, he spits in John Walker's face. Now, normally, I would not tolerate any disrespect towards Captain America. That being said, I hate John Walker. And for no more reason than him screaming in this guy's face, "Do you have any idea who I am?" There could not be a more diametrically opposed group of individuals than John Walker and Steve Rogers, assuming, like every bratty celebrity in the world, that they should be getting special treatment and respect from complete strangers solely because they are who they are. Coming up empty, they leave the building where Lamar says, "Listen, man, you got to understand, Carly and her team are giving vaccines, they're giving supply runs, they're helping people in these temporary refugee camps, and that instills a lot of goodwill. You're not just going to get people to turn against the only people in the world who are helping them." Cut to Sam and Bucky at Zemo's prison, where we get a little back and forth between our guys about who should go in and see Zemo, how Zemo feels about the Avengers, and particularly how things went down the last time when Zemo and Bucky were together. They finally agree that Bucky will go in by himself, but as soon as he walks in the door, what does Zemo do? He starts repeating the trigger words for the Winter Soldier. When Bucky stops him and say, "Hey, listen, man, I'm done with all that," Zemo says, "Yes, I agree, but there's still a little something in there." And that's going to be a little recurring theme in this episode, where they start to make us think, hey, how close is Bucky really to that line? Isaiah Bradley brought it up in the last episode where he said, "Listen, you can't just change who you are." Now we have Zemo saying, "Listen, you still have a little bit of Winter Soldier in you, kid." Zemo then tries to banter about the past and what happened last time the two of them were together, but Bucky jumps right in and says, "Hey, someone's recreating super soldiers and I need to know who they are." Now this obviously hit Zemo right in the chest, as his sole purpose in life now that his family was killed in Sokovia is to make sure that superhumans are not in the world. He hates the Avengers, he hated the Hydra Winter Soldiers that he killed in Siberia, and he's essentially in prison for absolutely no reason if people are still out there creating new super soldiers that could do the same damage that the Avengers and Ultron did to his family. After a slight jib to Bucky where he's saying, "Hey, listen, if you're coming to me to find out about Hydra, you must be really desperate," Zemo says, "But hey, I know where to start." Flash over to the garage where Bucky and Sam are debating whether they should break Zemo out of prison. Bucky then goes into this long drawn-out story, and we see a montage of it happen across the screen of how they could break Zemo out of jail. Much to Sam's chagrin and surprise, Enter Baron Zemo. Hey, this already happened. Sam is instantly pissed, but eventually they come to listen to Zemo. He starts looking around the cars, which apparently are all his because his family was filthy rich. He was actually a baron in Sokovia before Ultron made it fly through the sky. And he discusses his history with the Super Soldier Serum and his background. He opens one of the cars and we see his purple comic book mask. And then we leave the garage and we're on the tarmac, where Zemo, of course, reveals that he was a baron, as I just said. And they roll up on his private jet with his butler, who you could tell just absolutely loves this guy. Some real sweet Alfred taking care of Bruce Wayne vibes, despite the fact that Zemo is a supervillain. Well, not really that super of a villain, but a villain nonetheless. You could see that this butler finds no fault in his young employer. On the plane, Zemo is thumbing through Bucky's notebook for some reason, where he comes across the list of amends that Bucky has to make, in particular where Nakajima is circled. Now, he may be helping him, but Baron Zemo is never one to turn down an opportunity to stick it to a super soldier, so he has to twist the knife by calling out Nakajima's name directly. Bucky freaks out and starts to choke him and says, "Hey, if you ever mention that again, I'm going to kill you." Which brings the book to Sam's attention, and he says, "Hey, I know that book. That's Steve's book when he came back from the ice. He used to write down everything he had to do now that he was a modern-day person." They have a little back-and-forth banter about how Sam introduced Steve to Marvin Gaye and about the musical tastes of the three of them, but then it gives Zemo another opportunity to voice his distaste for super soldiers and how, despite Steve being a really great guy, the fact that he was an icon, a symbol in our culture, it leaves the opportunity open for people to start to be blind to his faults. He references Sokovia again. Obviously, Sokovia is going to keep getting mentioned again and again and again and again anytime Zemo's on the screen, because that's the only reason why he's here. Now, uncalled for, he likens America's fascination with Steve Rogers to Hitler and the Red Skull in Germany. But the point being to reinforce Zemo's motivation that he's in this to get rid of super soldiers, he's to get rid of superheroes in the world. And then he drops the bomb that we're going to Madripoor, baby. Now, as I brought up in the last episode of Fandoms Assemble, Madripoor is a Marvel comic book reference, particularly to the X-Men. Now, unfortunately for us, our boys get in and out of Madripoor without running into Wolverine, but just keep in mind that he does have very strong ties to this island. Zemo and Bucky then provide Sam and us as the viewer with a little background about Madripoor to set the scene, how it's a lawless city, a former pirate haven in the 1800s, and then to continue the theme of Bucky not totally being done with the Winter Soldier, Zemo says, "Listen, Barnes, you're going to have to be someone that you claim is gone if we're going to get out of Madripoor alive." A quick stop over in Latvia where we find Carly Morgenthau sitting next to Doña Medina. Now, I'm not sure if Doña Medina is supposed to be just a former teacher of Carly's, or if that's supposed to be her mother or some other relative, but Doña Medina is obviously on her deathbed with a necklace in hand, which clearly sparked the creation of the Flag Smashers logo. Carly's very upset. It appears, at least from this scene, that Doña Medina passes away before we cut back to Sam, Bucky, and Zemo in Madripoor. Back on the ground in Madripoor, not only does Bucky Barnes need to pretend that he's the Winter Soldier, Sam Wilson is also given a fake identity, Conrad Mack, a.k.a. the Smiling Tiger. The Smiling Tiger being an obscure Marvel comic book reference, from what I could tell from Marvel.com, has some slight ties to the Avengers and Baron Zemo, but no real further implications there of that character. We do get to see what the Smiling Tiger looks like, at least in the MCU, with a very funny picture, which I think was off Anthony Mackie's Instagram, of him, quote-unquote, dressed like a pimp. But hey, man, I love it. Loud jackets are cool. Zemo tells them once again that you need to stay in character or we're not going to make it out of Madripoor alive, and that they're headed to Lowtown, in contrast for the lovely lawless part of Madripoor referred to as Hightown, where they're going to meet Selby, a fence, who should be able to give them information on who would be buying and selling Super Soldier Serum. As they enter the bar, Zemo is referencing Bucky as the Winter Soldier, making sure to speak loudly enough for everyone in the bar to hear as he gives the Winter Soldier commands. But a wrench is thrown into their cover when Sam gets recognized as Smiling Tiger, who's evidently a regular at this bar, after which the bartender gives him his usual, which apparently is a shot with a snake pearl in it. Our crew is then approached and told that the power broker wants them out of there, where Zemo says, listen, the power broker wants to come down and tell me himself. He's more than willing. However, if he's not here or he doesn't want to talk to me, tell Selby to come see me because we need to have a chat. Now, as I'm sure you could tell from watching this episode and the description that we've been given in Madripoor thus far, these folks don't like being disobeyed. So Zemo has no choice but to, quote-unquote, activate the Winter Soldier and sick Bucky on this room full of poor, unexpecting gentlemen. And you could tell here, again, how close is Bucky to that line of being Bucky Barnes and being the Winter Soldier. Sam is shooketh. He has never seen Bucky fight like this. Really, the only time they would have been together where Bucky would have been fighting was in Wakanda, back in Infinity War. But thinking back, I can't even tell you if Sam was in that fight. So this is truly the first time that Sam has really seen Bucky throw down with that mechanical arm. Once everyone decides to pull out their guns, Sam tries to stop Bucky from beating the guy in front of him to a pulp. Zemo stops him and says, hey, remember, we can't break cover, but then eventually calls off the dogs, leaving Sam again shook to say, hey man, are you okay? Upstairs, they finally get their sit down with Selby, where she asks Zemo, how the hell are you out? Why are you not in an Eastern European prison? And after the pleasantries, they get down to business of trading, hey, give me information on the Super Soldier Serum, and I'll give you the Winter Soldier here and all his commands. Now, how Selby ever believed this was true, I don't know. The Winter Soldier is the ultimate assassin in this universe, particularly for a bunch of thugs in Madripoor who have no access to superpowers otherwise. But she starts to spill her guts. She says that Wilfred Nagel was hired by the power broker to make the serum. Now, not sure if we covered this in episode 2, but Wilfred Nagel is a callback to the experiment where Isaiah Bradley was turned into a super soldier. In the comics, after Erskine was killed, once Steve Rogers was turned into Captain America, the U.S. government immediately replaced him with Wilfred Nagel, who led the Isaiah Bradley study. Now, as we'll find out, this Wilfred Nagel is a modern-day character, obviously not as old as 80-year-old Isaiah Bradley, but that is where the name, at least, and the character, the idea of Wilfred Nagel came from in the Marvel Universe. Before they could go on, Sam gets a call from his sister Sarah. Their cover's blown, and Selby is shot by an angel through the window. Instantly, as soon as they get outside, there's a text that goes out to everyone in Madripoor. It's nice to know that they have a subscription hit business in Madripoor for 1,000 Bitcoin. Now, as of making this podcast, 1,000 Bitcoin is approximately $55.8 million. So everybody's coming. How, it just said in the text, Selby's killer, how everyone knew that that was Zemo and Bucky and Sam, I don't know. I guess because it was a big deal getting them up to see her. But after running through the streets under heavy fire, again, an angel from the rafters starts to clear their way, and it's Sharon Carter. I want candy. No, not Aaron Carter. Sharon Carter, again, Peggy's niece and Steve's former love interest, who we've been waiting for since the first episode's credits, where they referenced Agent Number 13 as S.H.I.E.L.D., and they gave us her picture. But no time to catch up here. We need to get safely inside, and up to Sharon's apartment they go. And we find out that Sharon's life has essentially been ruined by stealing Cap's shield for him, and we find out Sam's wings as well. Once the notice goes out from the Hydra-led S.H.I.E.L.D. leadership that Cap is now an enemy of the state. This new life on the run has brought her a high-rise apartment in Hightown, as well as a promising new career as a stolen art dealer. We then get a fascinating fact I hope is true, that 50% of all the artwork in the world, famous artwork like the Mona Lisa and the stuff you would see in these large museums, is actually fakes, because the other 50% is in private collections of black market art dealers. Sharon is now one of those art dealers, and Sam asks whether this life is really for her and why she hasn't come home yet. Sharon says she hasn't seen her family, she hasn't seen her father has no idea where she is, and that she can't come home or else she'll be arrested the second she steps foot on U.S. soil. She questions Sam on all his BS, I love being a hero, America's great, and then asks Sam and Bucky, how is the new Captain America? Much to Bucky's annoyance, he says, don't get me started, to which Sharon's got shots for him too, saying, listen, Wonder Boy, Mr. America, I remember that you, before you were the Winter Soldier, you were just good old Cap's sidekick and his best friend, and you believe in all this America hooray crap just as much as Sam does. They get down to business, and Sam starts to tell Sharon about how they're in Madripoor because they're looking for Carly Morgenthau, everything she's done. They're looking for Wilfred Nagel, as Carly clearly has gotten the Super Soldier Serum, and in the midst of killing Selby, they got information that Nagel had supplied it to her, and he's in Madripoor as well. She confirms for him that indeed Nagel is in Madripoor and that he works for the power broker. That's common knowledge. And Sam extends the offer, listen, I'll get you a pardon. They pardoned the psychopath killer Winter Soldier who's killed everyone that he's met. I can't see them not pardoning you when all you did was steal a shield for Cap and my wings in defiance of guys we later found out were high up leaders in Hydra. They strike a deal that in exchange for her help, Sam will do his best to get a pardon for her. Then off she goes to her stolen art dealer party, where Zemo scoffs at the idea that they could possibly get into any trouble. Now I'll just take a quick reprieve from the episode recap to tell you about a Twitter hashtag I saw called the Zemo Cut, in which fans are asking for the full unedited footage of Zemo dancing in that nightclub. Now here at Fandoms Assemble, we wholeheartedly support the hashtag Zemo Cut movement, and we hope that that is released at some point in the future on Disney+. But back to the episode. The next morning, we now see Bucky, Sam, Zemo, and Sharon at the docks, where they are looking for Wilfred Nagel's lab in container number 4261. Through a Cluian false door in the back of the container, we find Nagel's lab, while Sharon Carter stays outside to provide protection. Now, I'll just mention this here. While the guys go inside, Sharon Carter kills about 25 people who are still looking for them based on that 1,000 Bitcoin bounty. Inside, the guys obviously don't know that, and they confront Nagel, who starts to delve into his background. Now, as I said, Wilfred Nagel was originally Erskine's successor immediately after he was killed and Steve Rogers was created, leading to the creation of Isaiah Bradley. But in the MCU, Nagel is a modern-day character with a similar but not altogether the same backstory. Before their downfall, Nagel was an agent of Hydra, where he was on the verge of cracking the Super Soldier Serum for them. After Hydra's downfall, though, he went to go work for the CIA, where he finally had access to Isaiah Bradley's blood. The U.S. Super Soldier experiments of Isaiah Bradley obviously still took place, and while he wasn't the creator, Nagel now had Isaiah's blood to reference to recreate his own serum. And upon being at the doorstep of cracking the formula, Nagel was snapped out of existence by Thanos. Returning 5 years later, after the events of Avengers Endgame, Nagel was no longer employed by the CIA, who had abandoned the Super Soldier efforts, where he was then employed by the power broker in Madripoor, who was very interested in getting his hands on super soldiers. Under the employ of the power broker, Nagel has apparently created an elegant serum, one that does not alter the body composition of the subject, nor does it require the extensive machinery like the Vitaray chamber that Erskine's serum required. Nagel then informs the three that he had created 20 doses, but Karli Morgenthau stole them all, and that Karli had contacted him to save Dona Medina's life in exchange for the extra serum, but he blew her off, and obviously we find out in this episode that Dona Medina died. Now, with no serum in the lab and no serum at his disposal, Wilfred Nagel is just a danger to Zemo, who immediately shoots him in order to prevent Nagel from creating any serum again in the future. After the shot is fired, the container they're in is RPG'd by one of the bounty hunters who's out there looking for them. The lab is blown up and a firefight with the three gentlemen and Sharon Carter ensues. Now, much in Winter Soldier fashion, Sam and Bucky still can't get on the freaking same page, and they go different directions when trying to tactically maneuver around this battle scene. Sharon needs to break them up like the babysitter as Zemo breaks away and dons his purple comic book ski mask to instantly end the fight as he shoots a gas line which blows up all the bounty hunters in the area. But before they can escape, we get one more scene with Bucky taking his bionic arm and harpooning a guy right in the chest before Zemo pulls around in his classic car and they escape to live another day. Now, before we can leave the docks and start talking about what Karli had done at the GRC supply depot, we get a shot of Sharon Carter meeting with a woman who appears to be dressed as a detective, where she says, "We have a problem. I'll tell you in the car. Get in." Now, is Sharon really an underworld art dealer, or is she simply working undercover for S.H.I.E.L.D., and she needs to maintain that secrecy, even with Sam and Bucky, especially because they have Zemo with them? But she's on a mission for another purpose in Madripoor, which has required her to stay underground since the events of Captain America and the Winter Soldier and later Civil War. But we'll put a pin in that for now and head to Lithuania, where we find Karli Morgenthau and her fellow flag smasher Dovich outside of the Global Repatriation Council supply depot. Now, a quick pause, and we'll talk about this in the Easter egg segment of this episode, but on the gate, there's a giant red and blue X. Now, apparently, it's a running joke around the internet that the Eastern Europeans must love the X-Men because this is just a common street sign over there, which means that you can't drive in that way. It's an out only. However, there is absolutely no reason why they needed to include that sign in Falcon and the Winter Soldier with all the made-up countries and customs that they show in this show, unless they were trying to get the viewers to think about the X-Men. But again, we'll talk about that later on in the Easter egg segment. Outside the gates of the supply depot, Karli and Dovich discuss their backgrounds and how they found themselves in Madripoor. We find out in an attempt to make Karli a tragic character that she wanted to be a teacher before the blip. And then they get into how scared they were when they were taking the serum, how much it hurt, but how they did it in order to help all the helpless children in these refugee camps after they've been forgotten by the GRC and the world at large. And as we touched on in episode 2, their underlying feelings of how the GRC has only been worried about the people who came back after the blip and not all the folks who had to suffer with half the universe gone for 5 years. From what we've seen in the MCU to date, unlike Thanos' intention, it definitely wasn't a utopia after the snap. In Ant-Man, we could see people's homes just abandoned and things left in the street, and everything with Steve and the support group that he had in New York. It was definitely a traumatizing time, and to not be in the U.S., to be in more underdeveloped, poorer countries, I can only imagine what Karli Morgenthau had to go through those 5 years and how that could inspire a rebellion like the Flag Smashers. Now, before they break, Karli mentions to Dovich that she knows that Nagel was killed in Madripoor, and despite Dovich's concerns that the power broker is going to kill them for the remaining 11 doses of the Super Soldier Serum. Carly says, listen, we have him right where we want him now. The power broker will come begging because we have the only Super Soldier Serum in the world. Why does the power broker want the Super Soldier Serum? We'll touch on that in this episode's Fandom Academy. But before we cut back to Bucky, Sam, and Zemo, a quick stop at Zemo's prison, where John Walker and Hoskins, despite heading there at the beginning of the episode, finally get to Zemo's prison and find out that he's escaped. Instantly, despite Hoskins' trepidations, John Walker goes to Sam and Bucky broke him out. They came to visit. There's logs that show that Sam and Bucky went in to see Zemo, and they know that they must be on the same trail that he's on, just 2 steps ahead of Zemo being the source to find out who might have some Super Soldier Serum laying around. Which leads us to our friends back on Zemo's plane, where Sam Wilson is talking to First Lieutenant Torres about Doña Madani and asking her to look into Doña to find out where Carly might be. I have a note here that I found it very amusing that much like someone would do with their gun after being in a firefight, Bucky is sitting there polishing his bionic arm. They then discuss Sharon Carter and Isaiah Bradley and the meaning of the Captain America shield. Sam is very conflicted that he gave up the shield in the first place, but after seeing the destruction it's caused in Sharon and Isaiah's lives, wishes that he would have destroyed the shield as soon as he got it. Bucky then goes into saying, listen, man, the world's really upside down right now, and the shield is in the wrong hands, but the shield means a lot to me, and it means a lot to people around the world, and you conflating the bad things that have happened around the shield with the meaning of the shield and the impact, the positive impact it's had on people's lives for the last 100+ years is just wrong. Bucky then goes on to say, listen, John Walker needs to be removed of that shield. But if you're not going to be the man to do it, and you're just going to want to throw away the shield once you get it, then I'm going to take it for myself, and I'm going to become Captain America. Sam then gets a call back from First Lieutenant Torres, who tells him that he found Doña Madani and she had passed away in Riga, Lithuania, by the Baltic Sea. The plane changes course, but before we get there, cut to Carly Morgenthau and Dovich back outside the Global Repatriation Council's building at night with the rest of the Flag Smashers, where they're pulling off a supply heist. It turns out that the Global Repatriation Council, despite all their grand commercials at the beginning of the episode, were stockpiling 6 months of food and supplies, while all these people in refugee camps around the world are going hungry and dying of illness. Much to Dovich's horror, they then leave the GRC men tied up, and when he says, hey Carly, you getting in your car? She says no. 2 seconds later, car bomb goes off, the entire building bursts into flames, and Carly killed everyone in there, saying, listen, this is the only language, violence is the only language that these people understand. Leave Carly with the mad look in her eye. We head over to Riga, Lithuania. Zemo's plane is apparently really fast. He's got that Game of Thrones season 7 and 8 time travel thing going on. And when they land in Riga, Zemo takes another opportunity to talk about the horrors that happened in Sokovia. He asks Sam and Bucky, listen, did you guys ever go visit the memorial? Oh, no, because the Avengers don't care. They just go around and they break shit and they kill people and then they move on. But he gives us a very interesting tidbit, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, about how Sokovia was swallowed up by the countries next to it after the events of Age of Ultron, once everyone had died. And when things like that happen, we know, at least in the real world, that creates a power vacuum. People start jostling and taking position of who's going to control and lead that new land. Also, he didn't mention who the 2 countries were that swallowed up Sokovia to begin with. More on that later. Before they go inside, Bucky says, hey, you guys go ahead. I'm going to go for a walk. He takes a few steps and picks up a little engraved bead, which is making a transmitter sound. Now, I don't know if Bucky can hear that transmitter in his head, if there's something to do with the vibranium tech in his arm that led him to that little vibranium bead, but he walks a few more blocks and finds another one, and then he starts calling out, "Hey, you dropped this. Hey, I was wondering when you'd come." He turns around and he comes face to face with Ayo, sorry, maybe I said that wrong, of the Wakandan Hatut Zarazi, aka the War Dogs. Boom! Wakanda's here. Bucky, you broke the guy out, and now you have to pay for it. Is Ayo gonna fight her way in to get Zemo? Is Bucky gonna be able to talk her down in episode 4? Is she there to kill? Is she there to arrest him? Why isn't it Shuri? It's a war dog, so, clearly she's got one purpose in mind, most likely. Who sent her? Most importantly, who's leading Wakanda? These are all fascinating storylines. I'm wondering if this was written before or after Chadwick Boseman's passing. Really would have been a mind-blowing drop to have Chad standing there in the street as T'Challa as opposed to Ayo, but I'm sure it'll be a really fun storyline going forward. And I really hope they explain how Bucky noticed the beads, found the beads, followed the beads, calling the beeping that was going out. That would be really cool to see. It's just like another layer of dedication and connection with Bucky and Wakanda that I'm hoping flourishes as his character transitions from Bucky to Winter Soldier to Bucky out to the White Wolf. And as I said in episode 2, my hopeful future for him as a protector of Wakanda. But that'll do it for this recap of episode 3 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the Power Broker. And as you know, Fandoms Assemble strives to be the #1 source on the internet for all those who love to think way too hard about our favorite movies, books, and television shows. To honor that promise, we got to give you some analysis. We got to give you some things to think about. So here's the top 5 questions we had from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, episode 3. Question number 1, what is the real deal with the GRC, the Global Repatriation Council? So as we know, this episode starts out with the GRC commercial, Wanda-esque, as I talked about in the episode summary. But then throughout the episode and moving forward, we're going to see these GRC posters with their slogan all over them. And it just seems, especially the way that they've been treated, or that they've been treating the Flag Smashers and the other refugees around the world, that something more ominous going on here. I don't believe for a second. I mean, if you look back to the aftermath of the Battle of New York, Tony Stark was the head of the cleanup division, even though he was the one that caused the mess in the comics. That's a job taken up by Tony Stark and the Kingpin from the Spider-Man comics. So I don't believe that the GRC is 100% a charity organization. And I'll just leave it at that for now. Question number 2, is John Walker going to go full villain here, or is he going to pass the mantle peacefully? So we know, thanks to the preview of toys that are going to be released, that Sam Wilson is eventually going to don the Captain America armor and wear the shield. I hope that that's not, a spoiler to anyone here. I mean, the show is called Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Of course, that they're going to honor Steve Rogers' last wishes and pass the mantle over to Sam Wilson eventually. But how do we get there? So is John Walker going to go full villain? Is he going to do something that's going to require Sam and Bucky to defeat him? Or is he going to go the other route I could see, which is he's such a bumbling idiot and so full of himself that he falls into the hands of the Flag Smashers or the Power Broker, and Sam and Bucky need to save him. And then he says, you know what? I'm not made out to be Captain America. You should be Captain America. I'm thinking it's going to be option 1. As I said, this guy's way too full of himself. As we saw in this episode, anytime that Sam and Bucky questioned his authority, he got mad. They end the episode in episode 2 with him saying, well, if you're not going to get behind me, stay the hell out of my way. He thinks that Sam and Bucky broke Zemo out of jail, which of course they did, but he's off on a tangent going rogue right now outside of his military direction to find Sam and Bucky and find Zemo because he thinks that they're with him. So I think the only option for John Walker going forward is to turn full villain, someone that Sam and Bucky need to defeat in order to win the mantle back. And I think for Sam's character, especially given, that he gave up the mantle of Captain America in the eye of the public, and then the government had to bring it back for a Cap to even be around. I don't think that a peaceful transition of power, it's going to be like the Mandalorian with the Darksaber, where she had to win it from Mando. She couldn't just take it peacefully because she wouldn't truly be the leader of Mandalore if she didn't win it through battle. And I know that, the U.S. in 2026 is not spaghetti Western Star Wars universe where we need to win everything in a shootout. But I think there would be some larger questions if it wasn't that Sam went and defeated a villain to win the shield back, but simply that the government just said, hey, you know what, we're going to give it to Sam Wilson instead. But I've seen enough to question Erskine's original thesis where he said that, they were looking for the best man, not the best soldier. With 3 medals of honor and everything he's done, John Walker is clearly the best soldier available, but there's definite character flaws here that make me nervous going forward that he's going to turn full villain and he's going to have the American flag and the shield draped around him when he does it. Question number 3. Has Sharon really gone into the deep underground in Madripoor and become an undercover art dealer, or is she working undercover for S.H.I.E.L.D.? So the entire episode, I really thought it was legit. I thought Sharon's life was really ruined. I thought she had really become an undercover art dealer. She seems to have the connections. She seems to be willing to put in the work and kill people who need to be killed, as we saw on the docks. But then the crew split and Sharon got into that car with that person who, again, I think was dressed like a detective. And I don't believe it anymore. I think Sharon's working for S.H.I.E.L.D. I think that there's someone or something in Madripoor that required her to be there. Maybe it's tracking the power broker. I don't know. Maybe she's doing something there for Fury, tracking the X-Men? I don't know. We don't really have a clear idea of what this world looks like right now. Per the latest MCU movies, we saw Fury is apparently on a ship in space with the Skrulls. We saw at the end of WandaVision that the Skrulls are recruiting Monica Rambeau to go up there to see him. So I don't see it tying into that at all. But I definitely think there's more that meets the eye here with Sharon Carter and her motivations in Madripoor and helping Sam and Bucky. Question number 4, how is Wakanda going to react to Sam and Bucky breaking Zemo out? So we saw Bucky face to face with Io at the end of this episode. So obviously they're pissed and they want Zemo back, but what kind of betrayal is this going to be for Bucky to be working with Zemo? Are they even going to understand why he did it, or is his status as the White Wolf in jeopardy in Wakanda? And are they going to start laying out the future of Wakanda here in Falcon and the Winter Soldier? Are we going to see Shuri? Did Chad shoot something before he passed away for this show? I don't think that's the case, but I'm really surprised that they're even touching Wakanda here, as I don't know if they have their idea fully fleshed out about how they're going to continue that world going forward. And in the near term, I don't know if Io is going to beat Bucky's ass here in the street, if she's going to storm into that building, or if he's going to be able to explain and talk her down. I'm assuming episode 4 is going to start with fireworks here, where she wants to go up and kill Zemo. I mean, he killed King T'Chaka, and they had to do the right thing about it. T'Challa turned him over to the police, and he went to jail for all this time, but that's generally not the way they handle things there. I mean, the world didn't even know that, the technology side of Wakanda existed for hundreds of years, and then, everyone in Wakanda was calling for Claw's blood for stealing the vibranium in Black Panther, but T'Challa obviously wouldn't kill him, and, Killmonger showed up with the body, okay, and that gave him some validity in some people's eyes. So, or the War Dogs, or the Dora Milaje, if that's where the group that Io's from, are they going to allow Zemo to walk out peacefully, or are they going to finish the job that they feel that T'Challa should have finished at the end of Winter Soldier? And last but not least, question number 5, who is the power broker? So as I said, the Fandoms Assemble strives to be the number one source on the internet for all those who love to think way too hard about our favorite movies, books, and television shows. To truly accomplish that, we can't just raise life's great questions, we got to answer a few of them ourselves. So, sharpen your pencils, crack open those textbooks, take a trip to Lowtown with us, and join me for Fandom Academy Lesson 3, The Power Broker. So according to Marvel.com, the Power Broker historically has simply been the owner of Power Broker Incorporated, a supervillain tasked with putting out superpowers for hire. In exchange for his services, all you would have to pay the Power Broker was 70% of your haul, and in essence, he was truly a businessman. He had no attachments to the work that he was doing, and he was the master of manipulation through white-collar manipulation in the Marvel Universe. This character has had 2 iterations over its run, the first being a known man named Curtis Jackson, Curtis with 2 S's, not our boy 50, and that character gave himself superpowers in addition to being a broker in superpowers. That guy could shoot lightning, fire, any kind of energy out of his hands. He could also fly, just the useful stuff in the event a business deal went bad and he needed to shoot his way out of something or he needed to escape. But ever the entrepreneur, he also created a mobile app called HenchX, which I guess is what they used to send out the 1,000 Bitcoin bounty on Sam and Bucky, and everyone in Madripoor, being the thugs that they are, obviously has the HenchX app downloaded, and they all got the notification, hey, we need you to go kill somebody. But now, how does the Power Broker character tie into the larger MCU? I do not believe that Curtis Jackson is going to be the Power Broker in this case. I think they're going to use a character that we already know. Now, in my heart of hearts, who would I want it to be? I want it to be Wolverine. I think that would be a really cool way to introduce him. Obviously, the Wolverine's a badass, and to find out that he was running Madripoor when he has a background in Madripoor, I think that would be really cool. However, there is a story that kind of makes sense here that ties in with the Power Broker and revolves around Darren Cross from Ant-Man. Now, in this story, the Power Broker is looking for investors in his HenchX app, and he comes across Darren Cross, obviously is looking to take out the Ant-Man. After finding out how much the Power Broker wanted in an investment in his HenchX app, Cross wound up stealing the idea, similar to how he stole the Ant-Man suit idea from Hank Pym, and the Power Broker is pissed. He calls off the assassination of the Ant-Man and redirects the might of the HenchX app to turn its sights on Cross. Now, not only are villains on the HenchX app apparently, but also Cassie Lang. Remember we talked about last time, folks, they have introduced a whole lot of Young Avengers already, Cassie Lang being one of them as well. Cassie Lang picked up the tip on the HenchX app, and she went after Darren Cross in exchange for superpowers of her own, and she became the Stinger. There was also a convoluted storyline about how Darren Cross needed Cassie Lang's blood because it had Pym particles in it, but nonetheless, for at least a period of time, Darren Cross had similar capabilities to the Power Broker. Darren Cross disappeared at the end of Ant-Man 1. Are we going to see him resurface here in Madripoor as the Power Broker? And is that going to tie into one of the few pieces of content that we have already announced in Ant-Man and Quantumania? As I said earlier, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, unlike WandaVision, unlike Loki, unlike the rest of the shows that are coming out, does not have a clear path forward. Is it going to lead into Black Panther 2? That's a long way out. Or is it going to start laying the groundwork for the Ant-Man movie completely unexpectedly? I necessarily don't want that, but I think when it comes to setting who the Power Broker is going to be, that Darren Cross makes a great villain, a guy with good business sense for all his flaws, and who would fit in perfectly as a shock reveal here, as no one's really given him any thought or attention since he was defeated and his Yellow Jacket armor was defeated at the end of Ant-Man 1. That being said, there are also a bunch of other tantalizing theories out there of who the power broker could be. I think the leader in the clubhouse now in the internet communities is Thunderbolt Ross. Now, Thunderbolt obviously had a lust for power. He loved the control he had over the Avengers. Things went south for him when Steve Rogers broke everyone out of the raft. Obviously, he was just proved wrong again and again and again. But I personally don't think Thunderbolt Ross has the cachet or the ability even to walk into Madripoor and become an underworld kingpin. Other popular theories have it as Sharon Carter herself. Again, we don't really know what the hell she's doing there. And the fact that, she's just a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent on the run who hasn't talked to anyone does not fit in with her advanced skill set and capabilities at being a spy. So is she working for S.H.I.E.L.D. or is she the power broker and she's just leading the guys down a hole because she doesn't want them to know that she's turned into the most powerful crime boss in the world? We also have people chiming in and thinking that it could be Zemo himself. However, I think that's less and less likely as they carry on in this story. I mean, for one, why would they have approached Zemo in the bar and said the power broker wants you out of here if he is the power broker? I mean, yeah, you can try and keep up the story, but clearly Zemo had motivations of his own in that bar, and he wanted everyone to believe that Bucky was the Winter Soldier or they weren't going to get out of there alive. And then, of course, you could have it be Curtis Jackson, a new character introduced to this world, or the GRC, as we talked about in question 1. We don't really know what the GRC's motivation is. Is the power broker somehow tied in with the GRC? I questioned at the end of episode 2 why the power broker's men were in legit attire. They showed up in more or less a cop SWAT outfit and some in military uniforms. So clearly they have some legitimate backing there. I mean, the power broker's money and influence could buy soldiers and police, I assume. But is there some larger underground organized crime syndicate that's running the GRC and the power broker is running both of those at the same time? It'll be very interesting to see. But for now, that'll do it for this week's Fandom Academy on the power broker. And now, here are some rapid fire Easter eggs that you might have missed. Number 1, we have the bars in Madripoor. So one thing that drew my eye in this episode was the sign, the neons of the Princess Bar and the monkey logo above the bar they go in to meet Selby. The Princess Bar is a favorite haunt of none other than Wolverine. Now, unfortunately, I did not see a gentleman with a patch over his eye sitting at the bar, but this is just another X-Men reference. We'll touch on that on Easter egg number 2. I can't wait to see if they include the X-Men in this show. We're just waiting and waiting and waiting. Eventually, from WandaVision to now, they're going to have to drop a legitimate mutant. We also have the guys walking into the Brass Monkey Saloon. The Brass Monkey being another bar in Madripoor that pops up frequently, particularly in the Captain America comics. Staying on the mutants trend again, Easter egg number 2, the red and blue X at the GRC building. I talked about this in the episode recap, that it is apparently just a common traffic sign out in Eastern Europe that you would see in Lithuania normally. But listen, there's no reason to include normal traffic patterns in the Marvel Universe. You wanted us to see that red and blue X, and you wanted us to think of the X-Men. And then, of course, we have some lower level, less conspiracy-related Easter eggs in this episode. Callbacks for those who have invested the last decade and a half in the MCU. We have Zemo referencing the Winter Soldier's trigger words. We have a callback to King T'Chaka's death in Captain America and the Winter Soldier. We also have Zemo's purple mask from the comic books, as I touched on earlier. Steve Rogers' notebook. This episode was chock full of back and forth references for people who are invested in the MCU like we are. May not have garnered any notice, as we're just here for Falcon and the Winter Soldier as a small piece of the bigger story, but could definitely confuse the hell out of some people or be missed completely by someone who didn't watch the other 26 movies. And finally, my favorite Easter egg, And the last one here in this segment is going to be when the guys leave Sharon at the docks and they get into the car and Sam says, "You're not going to move your seat up, are you?" That is a running gag between Sam and Bucky and just goes to show the brotherhood and the camaraderie that exists between them, even though they've been constantly bickering and fighting this entire series. If you recall, in Captain America's Civil War, Steve and Sharon meet up for Steve to get something and they kiss, and Sam and Bucky are sitting in the car smirking at him. Well, when they go to pull off, Bucky is in the back seat and he says, "You're not going to pull your seat up, are you?" And Sam says no. So it was nice to see him paid back here. Those two watching Steve and Sharon kiss is one of the funniest moments in the Captain America run for me, as it's just so relatable. And, you know, if that's really happening and your boys are sitting in the car when you get done with your girl and you walk back to the car, you're going to get razzed. And I really just loved any instance where Steve was given a family, because I just love that character so much. But that'll do it for this week's Easter eggs you might have missed. A quick one here. But now we're going to get into a new segment, folks. I think we have enough content here, enough bulk around the Falcon and the Winter Soldier story that we could start theorizing, with 3 episodes to go, how this story is going to end and how it's going to tie into the larger MCU. Working titles for this segment include Tinfoil Hat Time and Where the Hell Do We Go From Here? So, drop your preferred choice or any other names for this segment in the comments on our Instagram. At FandomsPod, FANDOMS, if you're not following already, and that would be appreciated. But now, please indulge me as I take you through how I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier is going to finish out. Number 1, the Wolverine is the power broker. We've seen the X references all over the place. We saw the Princess Bar. Wolverine, or some sort of Quicksilverian reference, needs to be made about Wolverine in the near future. Number 2, Sharon Carter is still a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent tracking Wolverine on Nick Fury's orders. The architect of the Avengers Initiative is now down a whole lot of Avengers. He needs to find superhumans to build back his team so that when he returns to Earth, he has someone there to protect it. Yes, he has Spider-Man, but he doesn't really trust Spider-Man. Yes, he has Black Panther, but who knows where that storyline's going to go. And yes, he has Captain Marvel, but even during the events of Infinity War and Endgame, she was traversing the universe, the galaxy, looking for other planets to save. She is completely a free agent, so we need some superhumans here in the States who can battle these villains, and I think that's where enter X-Men. Number 3, John Walker is going to go completely insane, and he's going to wind up killing somebody, or he's going to wind up blowing something up. He's going to wind up going completely off the grid in his pursuit of Zemo and his insistence that it had to be Sam and Bucky who broke him out, that something's going to happen where he's going to turn full villain, and it's going to become Bucky and Sam versus John Walker and maybe Lamar Hoskins, but Lamar's just a soldier, so maybe he turns away from John. That's still to be seen. But there are some dark backgrounds to the John Walker character, and we've seen enough to see that, hey, this guy is a twisted individual that Sam and Bucky are going to need to take care of. So, what do we have? We have the Wolverine as the power broker, Sharon Carter as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent in Madripoor recruiting mutants, and Sam and Bucky in for the fight of their lives against the new Captain America as he turns into a supervillain. Now, what does that mean for Carly, for Zemo, for Wakanda? How are they going to wrap up this story? Since this segment is about forecasting the future, I'd say that Carly gets off somehow. The GRC has to be some larger organized crime syndicate. There's too many look, Big Brother is watching-esque posters hanging around to think that that's not going to turn sour. So I think Carly gets off because it turns out that she was fighting in the right all along. Maybe she converts into a superhero at some point. And then for Zemo and Wakanda, I think Zemo goes to jail at the end of all this. Wakanda's going to bring him back. He still killed King T'Chaka and still needs to pay for his crimes despite this little spurt of freedom to help our boys Sam and Bucky. But yeah, that's how I think this series is going to go. I hope you like this segment. We're going to keep doing this moving forward. We're going to adjust. We're going to adapt. We're going to come up with newer, wilder, crazy theories that I hope pan out. And I promise, unless I see him in the show, none of them will be Mephisto. Stop with that. But nonetheless, we've come to another end, folks, of Fandoms Assemble Episode 3. We're on a run now. So if you like the pod, please subscribe, rate, and review on whatever your preferred podcast channel is. Number 2, if you have a friend, family, a parent, a dog, a grandmother, a neighbor who loves the MCU, loves Falcon and the Winter Soldier, wants to learn more, maybe needs some background on the educational pieces that I provided in this podcast episode, it is your obligation to share the Fandoms Assemble podcast with them. And number 3, for more Fandoms Assemble content, clips from this episode, news and notes coming from me, please subscribe, follow on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Fandoms Pod, FANDOMS Pod. Please drop a like, please drop a follow, please drop a save content and a share on our posts on Instagram. And let's work on getting Fandoms Assemble TikTok viral, folks. That is the number 1 social media platform in the world right now for organic outreach, and I would love to be one of those lunatics with the crazy theories you see as you're scrolling through your For You page. But please, most importantly, after you're done with all that, come back next time as we cover Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Episode 4. Until then.